The rain had been falling for 3 days without pause, turning the quiet rural town of Greystone into a place swallowed by shadows and waterlogged streets. Streetlights flickered like dying fireflies, their glow barely pushing back the heavy fog that clung to every surface. The townsfolk whispered about the storm, saying it felt wrong, like it wasn't just weather, but something alive, creeping in from the woods. Evelyn had returned to Greystone after nearly a decade away. She hadn't planned to stay long, just enough time to settle her late grandmother's affairs and sell the house that stood at the edge of the forest. The house had always unnerved her as a child, with its crooked shutters, whispering floorboards, and the way the woods behind it seemed to lean closer each year, swallowing more of the yard. The first night back, Evelyn couldn't sleep. The storm pounded against the roof, but it wasn't the thunder that kept her awake. It was the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate steps echoing in the upstairs hallway. She froze in bed, staring at the ceiling. She was alone, or at least she thought she was. Gathering courage, she grabbed the flashlight from her bag and crept into the hallway. The beam cut through the dark, illuminating peeling wallpaper and dust-covered frames. The footsteps stopped. The silence pressed against her ears like a weight. She whispered, "Hello?" but her voice sounded foreign, swallowed by the house itself. Then, faintly, she heard it. A whisper. Not words exactly. More like the hushed sound of someone exhaling right behind her ear. She spun around, but the hallway was empty. Her heart hammered. She laughed nervously, blaming exhaustion and the storm. But when she returned to her room, she noticed something she hadn't before. Muddy footprints on the wooden floor, leading from the front door up the stairs, stopping right outside her bedroom. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She bent down, tracing the prints with her flashlight, noticing the depth and weight of each step. They weren't small, definitely not a child. Someone had been inside her house, and not recently, but just long enough ago that the mud hadn't dried completely. Her phone lay dead on the nightstand. She'd forgotten to charge it during her drive back. No calls, no texts, nothing. Alone. Truly alone. She backed away from the trail, her pulse echoing like a drum in her ears. From the corner of her eye, a shadow flickered across the hallway. Evelyn whipped around. Nothing. Only the moonlight cutting through a cracked window. She shook her head, trying to convince herself she was imagining things. Exhaustion, she told herself. Pure exhaustion. Then the whisper came again, clearer this time, almost melodic, as if someone, or something, was testing her resolve. She couldn't make out the words, only the cadence of a voice that seemed to come from inside the walls themselves. Compelled by fear and curiosity, she followed it, flashlight trembling in her hand. She descended the staircase, each creak of the steps amplified by the storm outside. The living room was empty. The fireplace, cold and unused, cast monstrous shadows on the peeling wallpaper. And yet, a soft, almost imperceptible tapping began. Something moved across the floorboards, circling her like a predator playing with its prey. Her heart threatened to burst from her chest. Evelyn's mind raced through every story she'd ever heard as a child. The local legends of Greystone, the missing hikers, the vanishing families. She knew the house's history, of course, but as an adult, she'd always dismissed it. That night, every warning she'd ignored returned to her, crystal clear. The tapping stopped. Silence pressed in again. Evelyn squinted at the far corner of the living room. A door she hadn't noticed before, half hidden behind moth-eaten curtains, stood slightly ajar. Light, faint, flickering, spilled out from the crack. She didn't remember that door from her childhood. With her pulse in her throat, she stepped closer. The whispers intensified, overlapping, almost like a chorus of voices guiding her toward it. She reached the handle, cold and damp under her fingers. The door creaked open. Inside was a small room, filled with old furniture stacked in strange angles. Dust motes swirled in the beam of her flashlight. And in the center, a mirror. But it wasn't any mirror she'd seen before. It pulsed, almost breathing, and in its reflection, Evelyn didn't see herself. She saw the room differently, twisted, alive, as though the house itself watched her through the glass. Then the door slammed shut behind her. The flashlight flickered and died. She was plunged into darkness, heart hammering. The whispers rose in a crescendo surrounding her. Evelyn realized, with a chill down her spine, that the house had been waiting for her. And whatever it was, it didn't plan to let her leave easily. Evelyn stumbled backward, her hands brushing against the walls, slick with dampness and the tang of mildew. Every corner of the room seemed alive, as if the shadows themselves had weight and intention. She couldn't see the ceiling, only the low flicker of something unseen casting reflections across the warped floorboards. Her mind raced. This was impossible. Houses didn't breathe. They didn't whisper. They didn't trap you. And yet, here she was, every instinct screaming at her to run, and every nerve telling her she couldn't leave. Her fingers found a small candlestick on a broken table. With trembling hands, she lit it. The flame quivered, painting grotesque shapes on the walls, elongated figures twisting toward her, grotesque parodies of human form. Her own shadow danced alongside them, warped, monstrous, as if mocking her. The whispers grew louder, 1,000 murmurs layered atop one another, sometimes soft as a sigh, sometimes harsh as a command. She could almost make out words. Stay. Watch. Remember. Evelyn's mind drifted back to the town, to her grandmother's warnings. The house has a memory, her grandmother had said. It remembers those who enter. It records, it watches, it waits. Never linger too long. At the time, she'd laughed, thinking of ghost stories told around campfires. Now, she understood. Every story, every disappearance. The house had collected them all. She felt the weight of hundreds of lost lives pressing against her chest, each one a fragment of the house's consciousness. Then, a sound unlike any before. A scraping, slow, deliberate, coming from beneath the floor. Evelyn froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The candlestick flickered violently, casting her shadow against the mirror again. She saw it, not a reflection, but a room behind the glass, identical yet distorted, warped. In it, shadows moved independently. Figures crouched and wriggled, some clawing toward the glass, mouths opening in silent screams. Her blood ran cold. Compelled and terrified, she reached toward the mirror. Her fingertips brushed the surface, and it rippled, like water. For a moment, she felt herself pulled forward, her body tipping toward that impossible dimension. Panic surged. She yanked her hand back, heart hammering. She stumbled to the corner, gripping the wall as the whispers swirled into a chorus of voices, some pleading, some laughing, some hissing warnings she couldn't comprehend. Then she heard it. A name. Soft, almost tender. Evelyn. Her stomach dropped. The voice was human. Familiar. Impossible. She spun around, searching the room. But there was no one. The whisper repeated, closer this time, coming from behind the mirror. Evelyn's pulse raced. She knew she should run. but the pull was irresistible. Every fiber of her being screamed both terror and curiosity. She examined the mirror again. The figures behind the glass seemed to reach toward her in slow, deliberate gestures. One moved forward, and for a fleeting second, she recognized it. A young boy, eyes wide, wearing a sweater she knew from a childhood photograph. Her heart lurched. It was her cousin, who had disappeared decades ago, taken in the night during a storm much like this one. And then, just as quickly, he vanished, leaving only a ripple of darkness. Evelyn's mind spun. The house, it didn't just remember. It trapped. It preserved. It twisted reality to feed on those who entered. Every disappearance, every rumor of shadows moving in the fog, it was all true. But why her? Why now? The floor trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling in cascading sheets. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through her bones. She stumbled backward, hitting a wall. Her flashlight, long dead, lay useless. Only the candle flickered. And then she saw it. A door in the mirror. She didn't remember placing it there. It wasn't in the real room, only in that reflection. Without thinking, driven by a force she couldn't name, she stepped forward. Her reflection moved with her, but slightly delayed, like a puppet on invisible strings. The door in the mirror opened. A cold wind erupted from it, carrying the scent of wet earth, decay, and something else. Something old, sentient, watching. Evelyn took a breath. The candle trembled. Shadows pooled around her feet, curling, reaching. She stepped through. She fell, tumbling through darkness, walls stretching and bending impossibly. Time fractured. Moments overlapped. She felt hands, cold, soft, brush her arms, tug at her clothes. But when she tried to look, the hands vanished into nothing. Then, suddenly, she landed in a corridor bathed in gray, fog clinging to her skin. The walls here were lined with doors, hundreds of them, each one pulsing faintly with light. Some opened and closed on their own, others remained stubbornly shut. A faint laughter echoed, distant but unmistakable. Evelyn moved cautiously, exploring the corridor. Names whispered behind closed doors. Mark, Sarah, Peter, each one calling, pleading. The candlelight flickered. She realized this corridor wasn't just space, it was memory made tangible. The house wasn't haunted, it was a collector. Every lost soul left its mark, its echo, a room in this endless corridor. And the door she had entered through? Only one of many. A portal connecting the real world to this twisted archive. Ahead, she saw a door unlike the others. It was heavy, wooden, carved with symbols that seemed to shift when she looked directly at them. The whispers intensified, almost frantic. Do not enter. Do not touch. Leave now. But something compelled her forward. Evelyn pressed her hand to the handle. It vibrated under her touch. A whisper pierced through the chorus. Only here. Only now. Truth awaits. She twisted the handle. The door swung open to reveal a room bathed in brilliant white light, impossibly pure amidst the gloom. In the center, a figure, tall, indistinct, turned toward her. Evelyn's heart skipped. She couldn't see features, only the outline. And yet, familiarity struck her like lightning. She realized the figure was herself, older, tired, eyes wide with knowledge. The voice spoke again. You sought answers. You sought fear. You sought control. But only the brave, or the foolish, discover the truth. Evelyn stepped forward. The white light swallowed her. Memories of Greystone, the storm, the house, her grandmother, the vanished cousins, and the whispering walls, all converged into a single moment. She felt herself stretched, examined, understood. The house, at last, acknowledged her presence. Then silence. She awoke on the front lawn of her grandmother's house. Rain had stopped. The fog lifted. The sun pierced through the clouds. Evelyn was soaked, muddy, trembling, but alive. She looked back at the house. The shutters were crooked, the wood still leaning closer, but everything was calm, empty, as if nothing had happened. The truth, she realized, was both terrifying and simple. The house would remain, waiting for the next curious soul. But she had passed through. She had survived. She had seen. And for the first time in decades, she smiled. Greystone remained quiet, waterlogged, yet the shadows held no sway over her. Evelyn turned, walked down the street, letting the storm wash away fear, carrying only knowledge and the unnerving certainty that some doors are never truly closed. The footprints ended at my bedroom door, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. My hands shook as I gripped the flashlight tighter, knuckles white. I thought about calling the police, about leaving immediately, but something, some instinct buried deep, made me stay. I had to know. I edged toward the door, each step deliberate, listening to the storm batter the house like a drum, each clap of thunder making my heart jump. I pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing. No breathing, no shuffling, no whisper. Only the storm and the occasional groan of old floorboards. Finally, I turned the knob. The door protested with a creak that sounded deafening in the stillness. The room was empty. My suitcase was still on the floor, my clothes unpacked. Nothing seemed out of place, except for the faint smell of wet earth mixed with something metallic, like iron. My stomach churned. I flicked the flashlight across the room and froze. On my bed, written in something dark, almost sticky, were the words, "Don't turn around." A cold sweat broke across my skin. My flashlight beam quivered as I scanned the room. Nothing moved, but the shadows seemed to thicken, curling at the corners, like the house itself was breathing. I swallowed hard. Part of me wanted to run, to slam the door and lock myself in the bathroom. But another part, a reckless, stubborn part, pushed me forward. I stepped onto the bed, moving closer to the message, trying to understand what it could be written with. Blood? Ink? Something else? My mind refused to process. And then I heard it again. The soft, deliberate footstep. Not from the hallway, not from downstairs, but inside the walls themselves. I spun around, swinging the flashlight, but the beam caught nothing. Only the shadows, thick and suffocating. The whisper came again, this time clearer, but still not words. Just a hiss, a breath that sounded like it knew my name. Evelyn. My heart pounded, and I stumbled back, tripping over my suitcase. The flashlight skittered across the floor, its beam landing on the wardrobe. The doors, slightly ajar, now creaked as if something had been inside all along. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs refused. I was rooted, mesmerized. The wardrobe doors slowly opened, and a figure stepped out. Not fully formed, more like a shadow solidifying, yet unmistakably human in shape. I froze. The figure tilted its head, examining me with eyes that gleamed faintly in the flashlight's beam. I couldn't move. My voice caught in my throat. Then it spoke, not in words, but in a series of low, guttural sounds, like a language I somehow understood. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't have come back. I swallowed hard. Who are you? My voice was barely a whisper, trembling. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it stepped closer. The air turned thick, damp and heavy. Every breath I took felt like inhaling water. I could feel it moving closer, a pressure pressing against my chest. I forced myself to look down, and I screamed. The wardrobe floor was covered in more muddy footprints, but these weren't ordinary. They were deeper, twisted, as if something heavy had dragged its feet, not walked. They led to a small trap door I hadn't noticed before, hidden beneath an old rug. The figure gestured toward the trap door, and though my instincts screamed to run, curiosity took hold. I got on my knees, heart racing, and lifted the trap door. A wooden ladder descended into darkness so absolute that my flashlight barely penetrated the first step. I knew, somehow, I had to go down. The figure stepped back, fading into the shadows, as I lowered myself onto the first rung. Each step creaked under my weight, the smell of wet earth growing stronger. I descended further, feeling the walls close in, the air grow colder, almost liquid. At the bottom, I found a tunnel. The walls were lined with roots and stone, wet and glistening. The footprints continued, smaller now, leading deeper into the earth. A faint, pulsating light glowed ahead. I approached, careful not to make a sound, though every instinct in my body screamed for me to run. Then I saw them. Two figures huddled together, barely moving. Their clothes were torn, mud-stained, faces pale, and eyes wide with terror. And above them, hanging from the walls and ceiling, were objects. Strange, almost ritualistic symbols, etched in blood and dirt, glowing faintly in the dim light. My flashlight flickered, and for a second, I thought I saw shadows detach from the walls, inching closer, circling around the trapped figures. My mind raced. Who or what was this? And why were they here? Before I could react, the figures turned. One of them, a young man, stared directly at me, lips trembling. "You have to leave. Now," he whispered, voice hoarse. "Or it will take you too." I glanced around, heart hammering, and saw movement in the shadows. Something large, sinuous, almost human, yet impossibly twisted. It slithered along the walls like water, eyes glinting. The air itself seemed alive, whispering, pressing down. I realized then that whatever this place was, whatever my grandmother had been hiding, it wasn't just a house. It was a trap, a sentient space feeding on fear, on curiosity. And it had claimed more than just the people I saw. I couldn't stay. I had to escape. But as I turned, the ladder I had descended was gone, vanished. The floor below me had shifted, as if the house itself had swallowed it. Panic surged, but I forced myself to think. Slowly, methodically, I scanned the walls, the roots, the symbols. There was a rhythm here, a pattern in the chaos. I could sense it, like a pulse under my skin. I took a deep breath and started moving, following the faint glow, weaving between the trapped shadows, avoiding the stretching darkness that threatened to wrap around me. Every step was calculated. Every heartbeat echoed like a drum in the oppressive silence. Finally, I reached a small chamber. In the center, a pool of water, perfectly still, reflecting the faint light. And in the reflection, I saw it. Not a figure, not a shadow, but myself. Twisted, distorted, eyes hollow, staring back. And then I understood. The house didn't just trap people. It mirrored them. It showed you your fears, your regrets, your obsessions. And it consumed them, piece by piece. I knew what I had to do. I stepped forward, almost ceremoniously, and touched the water. My reflection rippled, warping, then solidified again. The shadows recoiled. The pulse slowed. The air lightened. I turned around. The ladder had returned. I climbed, faster than I thought possible, and emerged into my room. The storm outside had cleared. The first light of dawn spilled across the floor. Muddy footprints led nowhere, as if they had never existed. I packed my things, every step careful, never looking back. I left the house standing silent and waiting, but I didn't feel fear anymore. I had seen its secret, faced it, and walked out. As I drove away, the sun rising over Greystone, I realized the house had given me something after all. Clarity, a warning, and a story that no one would believe. Evelyn froze at the top of the stairs, flashlight trembling in her hands. The footprints that had appeared the night before now glistened under the beam, as if freshly made, although no rain had come inside. The house felt alive, breathing in shallow, uneven gasps. She descended carefully, the sound of her own heartbeat echoing louder than the storm outside. The living room looked unchanged, but something felt off. The furniture seemed to lean slightly, like the walls themselves were pushing inward, whispering secrets she couldn't decipher. Her grandmother's old piano stood in the corner, keys yellowed and chipped. A soft, discordant note played. Evelyn jerked back. No wind could have reached it. Max, her dog, growled low, hackles raised. She called his name. His eyes reflected the dim light with an unnerving intelligence, as if he understood more than a normal animal should. Footsteps again. Not upstairs, but directly behind her. She spun, shining the flashlight, and the beam caught a fleeting shadow slipping behind the staircase railing. Her lungs burned. "Who's there?" she demanded. No answer. Only the storm and the house's slow, deliberate sighs. Evelyn remembered the stories her grandmother had told. Tales of the house itself, how it absorbed anger, fear, and secrets, twisting them into something dangerous. She had laughed then, but now, every floorboard, every drafty corner felt like it was listening, judging. The back hallway beckoned, a dark mouth swallowing her light. She stepped forward. Max padded silently beside her, unusually calm. A cold draft blew past her face, carrying a scent she couldn't name, something ancient, wet and metallic. She shivered, thinking about turning back, but curiosity and terror mingled, pushing her onward. At the end of the hall, she found the old study. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, the room had transformed. Books were stacked in impossible angles, forming a labyrinth of paper towers. Candles flickered, though she hadn't seen a single match struck. Shadows danced violently on the walls. On the desk, a single notebook lay open, pages scribbled with handwriting that shifted as she looked, a language she recognized and didn't at the same time. She approached, heart hammering. The writing began to make sense, forming words she had never learned, phrases that filled her with both fear and clarity. "Not everyone leaves," the pages whispered. "Some are taken. Some stay." Evelyn's vision blurred and the room tilted. She stumbled back, grabbing the desk for support, and her flashlight fell, spinning across the floor. When she grabbed it again, the writing had changed. New sentences. "You are close. Do you see?" Her mind raced. The stories, the disappearances, the townspeople who never spoke of certain nights. They all clicked together in a terrifying mosaic. The house was not merely a structure. It was a sentinel, a collector of people's unspoken sins and unacknowledged fears. And tonight, it had chosen to show her the depth of its appetite. Suddenly, a mirror on the far wall fogged over, though the room's air was still. A handprint appeared. Not hers. Not Max's. A small, delicate print, impossibly human and impossibly wrong. And then another. Then another, tracing the outline of someone unseen. Evelyn stepped back. Max growled, low and menacing. A whisper rose around her, a chorus of voices, overlapping, whispering her grandmother's name, her own, and names she didn't know. Her stomach turned as the whispers formed sentences. "We were here. We remain. You cannot leave until you understand." Evelyn pressed her hands to her ears, but the sound penetrated, resonating in her bones. The house was alive, speaking, remembering, holding. She felt the walls pulse, the floor tremble, and the shadows begin to coalesce into shapes. Figures crouched, waiting. Instinct screamed at her to flee, but something compelled her forward. She needed to understand. She needed to see. She walked through the maze of books, each step echoing louder than the last, and reached a trapdoor hidden beneath a rug. It hadn't been there before, or maybe she hadn't seen it. Max sniffed, pawing at it. She lifted the heavy wood and descended. The basement was vast, impossibly so, stretching beyond the house's known dimensions. The storm's roar above was muffled, distant. Here, the air was thick with something metallic, iron-like, and the floor was slick with water. Shapes moved in the darkness, figures with human silhouettes but featureless faces, some whispering, some screaming silently. They turned to Evelyn, and for a moment, she thought she would faint. One figure approached, hands outstretched. It was her grandmother, or at least a version of her, eyes wide, mouth moving without sound. Evelyn's mind screamed that this was impossible, yet every instinct, every memory of the house told her it was real. The figure gestured toward a small pool of water at the center of the basement. In its reflection, she saw not her own face, but a montage of the missing, the forgotten, the secrets absorbed by the house over centuries. And then the calm. The water stilled. The whispers ceased. Max barked once. The figures retreated, dissolving into shadow. Evelyn's reflection returned, but something had shifted inside her. She understood now. Not all would leave, but some could choose freedom. She ascended, careful, the house unusually quiet, almost obedient. Outside, the storm had passed. Morning light filtered weakly through fog, illuminating streets still soaked. Streets that seemed untouched by the horrors within the walls of her grandmother's house. Evelyn stepped onto the porch. She looked back once. The house loomed silently, crooked and knowing, yet strangely at peace. Max barked again. She took a deep breath. She had survived, and she would leave, but she knew the house would remember her. As she walked to her car, the fog parted just enough to reveal a single figure in the upstairs window. Not threatening, just observing. A silent acknowledgement, a reminder that some mysteries never fully unravel, but some victories are enough to let you walk away alive. Evelyn drove into town, the engine's hum grounding her. Behind her, the house disappeared into the mist, as though it had never existed. Yet she carried its echo in her mind, in her bones, and in the steady, resolute heartbeat of Max beside her. She knew one thing. She had glimpsed the truth, survived the impossible, and would never speak of it. The town of Greystone would continue its whispers, the house its hunger, and the storm would return. But Evelyn had her life back. For now, she was free. And that freedom tasted sweeter than anything she'd ever known. And somewhere deep within the forest, the house waited. Patient, silent, eternal.